in a nutshell, when I was far younger, 1993, I started working on this case against Chevron in Ecuador with some other lawyers. Texaco, now Chevron, had polluted the heck out of the Amazon. They dumped billions of gallons of cancer-causing oil waste deliberately as a greedy, cost-saving measure, knowing full well that people would die as a result. They poisoned sources of water, streams, rivers that indigenous peoples had relied on for millennia, and it all got ruined in about 15 years. And we then sued them. Over an 18-year period, we ended up winning a big case in Ecuador's courts, affirmed by Ecuador's Supreme Court. The case was in Ecuador because they insisted that it be there. They accepted jurisdiction there. And then when we won, they refused to pay, and they attacked me, and they started by suing me for the most money any private person has ever been sued for in this country.
That's a lot.
Okay, guess how much? Guess how much?
$10.
$60 billion. No, hold on, imagine. Hold on, no. I have,
I'm sorry.
what's that? I have a family, okay? Wife and a son, he's now 16. But at the time they sued me, he was like 6. So imagine going to work one day, getting sued for $60 billion and coming home having to tell your family, oh, son, what happened today? I got sued, but the amount was so high, it really was obviously completely absurd. And so began a vicious attack on me, a demonization campaign really, an effort to criminalize my work and criminalize environmental justice work, which we are now seeing more and more in this country, in Atlanta and in other places, efforts by the state to turn legitimate advocacy into criminal activity through rhetoric and through repression. Okay, and that's happening writ large. It happened to me in a major way, and ultimately, as we continued to litigate the case, won a bunch of decisions in Canada to enforce the judgment that they refused to pay. Chevron convinced a U.S. judge to hold me in contempt of court because I wouldn't turn my computer over to Chevron that had all the confidential information on it, protected information. And the judge orchestrated a private corporate prosecution of me because the U.S. attorney would not take the case and had me locked up as a risk of flight, and I ended up being detained on a misdemeanor for 993 days.
We talked about this backstage. You're looking at a record holder up here. This is a person who's been incarcerated both under house arrest and in actual prison longer than anyone ever convicted of a misdemeanor in American history. So this is legal history here.
And it was the first corporate prosecution ever in the United States, and I think in the world. I haven't seen, usually an autocratic state that wants to shut someone up will do it via a government prosecutor, like you see this in a lot of countries, including here, okay? Russia, China, many countries, most countries, you have at least some of that going on. But in this case, the prosecutor would not do it, and the judge appointed a private law firm to do it. By the way, I consider what the judge did totally illegal. I mean, even apart from the substance of the charges, I believe I'm totally innocent of those. But separate from that, the process he used, I believe, is totally illegal. And no rule of law country would ever let a private corporation prosecute, and by the way, detain. Okay? Because there's never been, until my case in the history of this country, a person with no criminal record, charged with a misdemeanor, detained prior to trial. Okay, and not only was I detained prior to trial, when I came in with an ankle bracelet, by the way, it's really weird, by the way, I had an ankle bracelet right here for almost 3 years, and it never came off. You wear it 24/7, you sleep with it, you bathe with it, and it starts to become, the state puts this claw on your body, and it starts to become on you. And to this day, and this thing finally came off on April 25th of last year. By the way, thank you. I know a lot of y'all know probably this story and follow me and have supported me, maybe even donated to my defense fund. Thank you. I know there's many people out there. That's really what got us through this. But to this day, I have this phantom limb sensation on my ankle. I mean, I'm not bullshitting. Like, I feel like this claw is on my ankle still. It's crazy. I mean, even like inadvertently lift my pant leg up because it was like always so hard to, put my pants over it, take my pants off. It's just always kind of there. Independent journalists are the key, I think, to the struggle because the corporate media doesn't cover this stuff in the right way. When I was detained for 993 days, I mean, think about it. But by the way, I went to Harvard Law School, and that doesn't mean crap other than it's a privileged institution. In the New York Times, there was a Harvard lawyer, and by the way, I was in the same class as Barack Obama and Neil Gorsuch, okay? So one becomes president, one gets on the Supreme Court, and I go to jail. And I wouldn't trade what I do for what they do. I really wouldn't. But the New York Times and none of the networks covered my detention. I mean, it's a human rights lawyer in the United States.
And why didn't they?
Well,
Well, Matt, you were telling me backstage about the Gibson Dunn law firm.
Yeah.
There is association with the New York
Gibson
Times.
Dunn, yeah, they suck. We
okay,
prefer Brooks and Dunn, personally.
Gibson Dunn and Crutcher is a law firm based largely in New York, and they basically market themselves to scandal-ridden corporations as like the go-to law firm to engage in what they call the kill step. And the kill step,
The kill step, folks.
Yeah, they actually market this.
They're neoliberal hell.
Yeah.
That's neoliberal hell right there.
The kill step is a plan by the lawyers to basically kill the reputation of the lawyer and drive the lawyer off the case. So the victims of the company's poisoning, in this case Chevron's poisoning in Ecuador, are left defenseless and the case just can't go forward. So instead of defending the claims, which they know they'll lose, they attack the lawyer. And I think in my case, because I never went away, like the kill step is designed to basically, you sort of have like 10 levels of ratcheting it up, right? So you start here with like an ad, accusing the lawyer of being a fraudster. And most lawyers at that point would just quit. I mean, they can't like risk their whole career. And then they sort of escalate it little by little. And they sued me for $60 billion. They sued me as a racketeer, no jury. That didn't work. We kept going. We won a Supreme Court case in Canada on the enforcement action. Then they had to invent this whole theory about my computer to have me locked up. And they also, by the way, took my passport, which they won't give back because they're so scared of me leaving this country, going to other countries.
Do you still not have your passport back?
I don't have my passport. And organizing lawyers to go after their assets in those countries to make sure they pay the $9.5 billion.
This is about you not going back to Ecuador.
It's about me not.
Yeah.
It's me not going to Ecuador because, or going to Canada or Brazil or any country. I mean, Chevron has assets in dozens of countries. They're very vulnerable. I mean, by the way, they're doing this, just to be clear, because we're effective at what we do, and they feel risk that's created by our work. So they're just trying to shut me down.
But the work is still going on, isn't it?
The work is still going on. But it's been a bit stunted by me being unable to leave my apartment for 3
Right.
years. Through this experience is that, a couple things. When really the entrenched and corrupt pools of power in our country, and probably in any society, are truly threatened. Like when you go, you can get you can just smell their hot breath of their money. You're that close. Because we won the case, we won this judgment. They will easily discard what they call the rule of law, that is violate their own rules, which by the way aren't necessarily fair to begin with, but they will even throw out their own rules to silence and shut a person up who is a little too effective at challenging these entrenched interests of power. And that, I believe, fundamentally is what happened to me. And by the way, it's also happening right now to Julian Assange. That is exactly what's happening to him. There's no justification legally for an espionage charge against Julian Assange. They are trying to destroy him, kill him in prison, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Agreed.
they have a lot of power.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So when they were threatening to send me to prison, and I was like fighting it because I wasn't, this is kind of crazy, right? I have a family and a son and a wife, and no lawyer had ever been sent to prison on a misdemeanor contempt charge in our country's history. And when I'm sitting in house arrest, for over 2 years, and the longest sentence ever given a lawyer for my charge was 90 days of home confinement. Okay. Before my trial started, I had been in confinement for over 4 times the maximum sentence of 180
You were living
days.
COVID before, like, the pandemic.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, exactly. So it's just so they so quickly, stop disguising, right? Because
Yeah.
when you do a corporate prosecution, there's nothing hidden anymore, right? It's naked, it's right there. And by the way, it's not just me. I mean, I'm the only corporate prosecution, but think for a second, the Line 3 protests in Minnesota, the Enbridge pipeline. I don't know how many folks know about that, but there were hundreds of people charged with felonies, protesters. And the police who arrested them, several public police agencies in Minnesota, received collectively a total of $8.6 million from the pipeline company. Okay? That is, we see public functions of government being privatized by corporations so they can have direct control over those of us, like me. I think this is going to spread to journalists too. We don't stop it. To just basically act in the name of the state. Obviously it didn't happen, and I was actually treated professionally by the bureaucrats who run the prisons, who were like, "What are you doing here?" I was the only person in Danbury Federal Prison on a misdemeanor. I don't know if people know about Cop City, but there's something going on in Atlanta right now that has the potential to really blow the lid off sort of certain aspects of police culture. And it really concerns the intersectionality, I think you love that word, between the criminal justice movements, reform movements, and the climate movement. Because a bunch of very courageous young people have been camping out in this gorgeous indigenous forest just outside Atlanta in DeKalb County. It's about 400 acres, it's beautiful. And the Atlanta Police Foundation wants to build on this beautiful forest. They want to raise it and build a police training academy for $90 million. And it's really super extravagant, has a mock city and a 5 rifle, shooting ranges. Clearly it is going to be used to further militarize the police and train police to target mostly urban communities of color. It's a bad idea. And for so many reasons, and also raising this beautiful indigenous forest to build it makes it even worse. So you have a lot of climate activists and criminal justice activists there, and the police started calling them terrorists. They're terrorists because they have basically there's a police vehicle that was burned, there was some property vandalism. But bottom line is there's been a whole hyped out movement by the political establishment in Georgia, the governor, and I'm talking about not Stacey Abrams, but the whole elected leadership in Atlanta.
She's not talking about it either.
But Stacey's not talking about it.
No, she's not talking
about it.
And
neither is Senator Warnock nor Senator Ossoff, which is frankly
disappointing,
to their great discredit, in my opinion. But in any event, the police went in there, and this young man, Manuel Turan, ended up dead. He was a student at Florida State University, graduated magna cum laude in psychology. He was a great, great person, and the circumstances under which he was killed are very suspicious. His mother believes he was assassinated in cold blood. Well, I think, obviously, these are all personal. But is that Chris Smalls right there? Hey, Chris Smalls in the house.
Yes, we love Chris.
And we love Chris. Great labor leader, and Chris has been so supportive of me and the Ecuadorian people. Thank you, Chris. What I would say to that is, obviously, when people engage in activism, it's very personal. You got to figure out what you're capable of doing, what you want to do. In my case, when I started as a lawyer, just like a lawyer, right? I didn't really consider myself an activist. I wanted to win a lawsuit for my clients and also make a fee and then do more cases for social justice. That was my career path. I did not know I would be in this position at that time. And what often happens when you start down these paths, when you take the first step in a journey, you don't know where it's going to end up. And if you are, this is the irony, I think, if you're moderately successful, then you get more effective. The resistance is often can get very intense, and then you have choices to make about what you do at that point. But my best advice is to make sure that there's movement, solidarity in every struggle. Okay, we've got to stick together.
Talk to your neighbors.
Yes, we've got to
Talk
build.
to your neighbors.
We got to build capacity. I think I was a little vulnerable because I was doing this case at my kitchen table, really. Like, I mean, a lot of people were working on it in different places around the world that I was coordinating, but like, I think they thought I was really, really vulnerable. I'm just like a person, you know, in a New York apartment. This is a battle, right? They have strength. We got to build our strength. We have numbers, you know, so I think we just need to connect dots and build solidarity. By the way, speaking of connecting dots, in Atlanta, there's been a national call there's going to be a Solidarity Week starting March 4th. And if like literally thousands of people can get to Atlanta from around the country and stand in front of that forest, I think this whole Cop City thing is going to collapse. Like, I think it already is. You're starting to see signs of the elites in Atlanta sort of saying they're not into it anymore.
Right.
So that's an example of how we, as a national and global community, can help people who are putting their bodies on the line, on the front lines. And I can say when I felt my most vulnerable, a friend of mine came and said, it was like 2 months into it, and I kept thinking it would be another week. I mean, it just kept going. And she said, listen, it's much better to build solidarity than take pharmaceuticals. So just understand that. And I said, yeah, you're right. And I while I was detained, by the way, people come, they bring books and read this. They thought I was bored. I mean, they just thought, they thought I'm just sitting there. And I was working every day trying to build support and get the damn ankle brace.